Today's video, we're just gonna go around doing some homemaking tasks and I'm making some high protein egg white marshmallow. And we're gonna chat along the way about leaning into your feminine calling. So I was recently reminded of my prior career life just a couple of days ago. If you don't know my story, I was a teacher for 9 years. 3 of those last 3 years, I was a mom of 2 children, and it was the hardest 3 years of my life, honestly, working a career. I have more on that story. I'll link a video on that where I talk more about that below if you want to hear more of that story. But I just want to talk today about pulling away from that working mom culture that is so pushed upon women today. Talk about kind of just an encounter I recently had. So we had to spend a day out of the house. I had to take one of my children to an appointment. We were rushing all morning, rushing through breakfast, rushing through morning chores. Everything was rush, rush, rush. I felt like I was force feeding my children to get them out of the house on time, get them all loaded in the car, drive to where we had to go. Everyone was upset. Everyone was not happy because they were being rushed around. And I just remembered how grateful I am that that is not our life every day. And I know that's not the case for all families, for all mamas. There are families that have 2 working parents and it's just what has to happen at that time. I'm not judging anyone for that, but if that is something you are feeling the call to pull away from, that is why I make these videos, is to encourage those who are feeling that calling to pull away. So back to the story, we make it to our appointment. There's a medical student that comes in initially for the appointment, a very young, beautiful young lady in medical school, asking about how we were, checking on my child. And I know there are so many people that look at careers and schooling, especially medical schooling, as a very prestigious high calling, and it is. And I'm grateful that we have medical doctors when we need them in situations such as we did here recently. But this sweet young girl, all I could think about was her future children and how difficult it might be for her. It may not be, but all that was going through my mind is how difficult it might be for her in the future to leave her children for 40 plus hours a week to go to this career that she was in training for. And it just was really heavy on my heart when she was in the clinic with us. Then we moved on from that appointment. The whole time it was just rush, 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 move, move, move. There was not much relaxing. And then we headed to the park to have a little time to stretch our legs before we had to drive back home for about an hour and a half. And there were just parents on their phone everywhere, just not even taking advantage of this sweet time with their children. They could, and granted, these parents could be working. I'm not going to judge somebody for being on their phone because I do get on my phone as well sometimes in public. But about probably 75 to 80% of the parents, maybe even 90% of the parents there were just sitting on a bench staring at their phone while their children played. And it was just so sad, the culture we're in today. We have parents rushing around their kids to get in the vehicles to get somewhere for the day so they can get to their daycare, their school, so the parents can get to work. And we have women that are in prestigious programs, college programs, medical programs, whatever program they may be in, that are going into this career not really knowing if in the future they're going to want to pull away from that career and be a full-time mama. And I've encouraged women in the past that if you are pursuing a career, leave availability in your future plans, that if you want to pull away from that career in the future, then and be a stay-at-home mom, leave that opening, because I did not do that and it made pulling away from my career very difficult. And then we have parents at the park when they are given a little bit of time to spend with their children, just sitting and scrolling their phones. And it was just a really eye-opening day, reminding me how grateful I was that we are able to live such a relaxed life. And I never take this for granted. I never want to sound boastful because my husband and I have went through a lot to be able to have me stay at home with the children. Thankfully for his sacrifice and a lot of rearranging in our budget have we been able to make this work, not without some hard times. But the life that we have been able to create now, a much slower paced life, a much more relationship focused life, is something I never take for granted, and always want to encourage you, if you are looking to that or feeling the calling for that, lean into it, do whatever you can to make that happen. So it just made me realize that this whole day is just not how life is meant to be. We are meant to have relationships with our children, with our family, not rushing from one place to the other, rushing to get somewhere, rushing to leave somewhere, rushing to get home, rushing to eat dinner, rushing to get to the next outing. And then if we do go to a park or somewhere out in public to spend some time with our children, spending time with our children, not just sitting on our phones. And I've been guilty of this before, of course. And then through this entire day of rushing and living this fast-paced life of driving and getting kids in and out of the vehicle and getting kids to eat on time so we could get to the next place. That night when I got home, I was exhausted, and I just remember that feeling of when I was a working mom. I was trying to get from place to place to place to place. By bedtime, I was so frazzled, felt so chaotic. I felt like I'd had no time to just think. And I went to put my kids to bed that night, and I forgot to sing to my son. I got all the way downstairs, and he called me back up and said, "Mama, you forgot to sing to me and say your prayers." And I felt terrible because that's something I do every night. It's just a routine. But I had been so frazzled, so rushed that day, my brain just didn't function. And I just know there are mamas out there that are feeling that. They are rushing all day to get to a career, rushing all day to get to places, rushing all day to try to get meals on the table, rushing all day to get kids to events. And it is tiring, it is frazzling, and I know that's not how God meant us to live. So on the topic of relationships, taking time to create meaningful relationships with our children, with our family members, I think we actually live in a time where it's perfectly normal for mothers, people in general, to outsource many of their responsibilities. So for a lot of mamas, I think they have lost much of their mothering instincts, intuition, and confidence. We have cribs that rock our babies to sleep. We have sleep sacks, sleep suits that mimic our hold and warm touch. We have pacifiers that replace the breast. We have screens that are created to teach our children things so we don't have to teach them, and probably much more than I'm not thinking of right now. So these things do have a time and a place, of course, but they've made it all too easy to pull away from our mothering instincts and to create relationships with our children. I think mothers who ground their mothering in solid relationships with their children, and I'm not saying that you have to be a stay-at-home mom to do this. It is much easier to be a stay-at-home mom and do this. But if you're not in that situation right now, or you're striving to get to that situation, that season of life, then you can still create solid relationships. When mothers can create these solid relationships, they will mother more intuitively. We won't have to resort to techniques, manuals, Instagram reels, YouTube videos, but we will be able to act off of understanding and empathy with our children. So I remember with my first two children, I was a new mom. I was working outside of the home mom. I was away from my children for about 40 hours throughout the week. And I was constantly researching how to put my baby to sleep. If my child was going through some kind of a leap or a jump or a change, whatever they're called, I think they're called leaps. And how long should this wake window be? How much should I feed my baby? How long should they be napping? There was so much I just needed to outsource and look up. I just didn't trust my instincts. I was looking for the perfect pacifier because I didn't think my child should be using me as the pacifier. I was just trying to outsource, check all these manuals to understand how to be a mother, when all I really had to do was lean into my own intuition, and it's so much easier. It makes it so much easier. If we knew how to be with our children and who we need to be for them, we would need much less advice from outside sources on how to do these things. So for example, swimming lessons. You can definitely outsource this, and many people do. But something I've recently learned is teaching my youngest at 2, 3, 4 months old to get used to swimming in the bathtub, used to water on their face, used to ducking underwater eventually, doing rolls in the water, doing rolls to the side of the tub, and then transferring this to my older children in a pool, teaching them how to swim on my own. And the relationships that we have built in just our last summer learning swimming lessons on our own and not outsourcing that has been so beautiful and so valuable, and something that I really would have been sad to miss out on if I had outsourced swimming lessons. Now my kids are not swimmers yet. We're still learning, so I'm not saying I'm an expert at this, but it is something I wanted to tackle on my own. Now my older 3, I didn't start as early as my youngest, so I suspect he'll be swimming much faster than them. I'll actually link the information I got this from. This is totally not relevant to this video, but if you want a little more on teaching your child to swim, then I'll link some really good information below for you guys. But just thinking little things like that we outsource, that if we just took the time to do it ourselves, learn how to do it ourselves, there will be so much deeper relationship created. Another one is daycare, and my children have been to a day sitter, not actually a true daycare, but a day sitter. Outsourcing the most formative and important years of a young child's life when we send them to these places. And then again, I know this is not an option for all, and I don't want to guilt anyone who does have to send their children to daycare, because I know many of you probably already feel guilty enough and you don't really want to be in that situation. You're just there. But I want to encourage you that if you can make some things change, That's really the only reason I make these videos. And I know sometimes it feels impossible. For us, it personally did feel impossible. We had so many things we needed to pay off. We had so many things we needed to do. And we could not imagine cutting out my income. But God worked things around through a lot of prayer and his timing and leading into his trust. And it was possible, not without some hardships, not without a couple of really difficult years. And we still have really difficult times sometimes. But back to daycare. When we are outsourcing these most important years of our young child's life, it's no wonder that mothers who are absent from their children for 40 hours a week lack confidence in mothering that would come naturally if we had more time to prioritize this relationship. So this is a key point I was trying to make. When I was working 40 hours a week, I would come home to my children and kind of feel disconnected from how to mother them and had to look things up and ask for outside sources and not really able to lean into the intuition to mother them how I would have naturally been able to had I been given the opportunity to have more time with them. And I'm so grateful, never take it for granted that I do have that time now with my youngest two children. I've been able to be at home for their entire time since they were born. I'll say it again, the relationship with your children is the most important thing. If the relationship is solid, you have time to build that relationship, your mothering will be intuitive. It'll feel natural and right. So maybe you're trying to figure out which side of mothering you fall into, the gentle parenting, if you want to do child-led parenting, cry it out, co-sleep, all of these labels that we give just for natural things in life. Maybe you're trying to figure out which category you fall into, but maybe you don't actually have to. Maybe we could try just focusing on building amazing, high quality time filled relationships with our children, and the rest will fall exactly into place where it's intended to. So back to the story at the beginning, a lot of times we do have rush days, or we have to rush the kids out of the house, going from place to place, all for what? There was a whole day of relationship connection that I failed at, and I never want to have to do that again. If we are out and about for a busy day, I want to ensure we have plenty of time not to feel rushed, and that's not always the case, but plan a little more ahead so that we're not so rushed, so that I can focus on our relationship. And I had the encounter with the sweet medical student, having these thoughts of her future life and her future children, if she had children, if she would regret putting so much time and effort into a very prestigious, high-calling career, only to long to be home with her children more, to see her children more. And then thinking to the park, where so many parents were not even building any sort of relationship with their children, just scrolling their phones. So I just want to encourage you and remind you to build the relationships. Putting more time into those relationships is something you long for, and you're just not quite in that journey. Pray about it. Trust God for his plan in that, his timing in that. I did not ever think I'll be able to stay at home with my children for many, many years, but he worked things around for our family and made that possible. And he can do that for you too. Let him know the desires of your heart. Pray about them constantly. Be wise in your decisions financially, and just keep building the relationships, and everything will fall into place. Your mothering will fall into place. The relationship is still the most important, and taking the initiative in that will ultimately lead you to mother your children exactly the way they need you to.